He thought he controlled everything that entered his office, until something small, barefoot, and impossible crossed the line without permission. The glass walls of Ethan Cole's office reflected the late afternoon sun, turning the skyline into a golden empire beneath his feet, 30 floors above the noise of the city, where power was quiet and absolute, where every movement was calculated and every person knew their place. And in that world, nothing unexpected ever happened. Not anymore. Not since he built his life on rules no one dared to break. Rules that kept chaos out and control intact. Rules that made men twice his size lower their eyes and speak only when spoken to. Rules that turned silence into authority and distance into safety. And yet, in that moment, something violated all of it without making a sound, because the door had been left slightly open, just an inch, just enough for something small to slip through, something unnoticed by the guards trained to watch threats, not innocence. And on the polished marble floor, where reflections usually belonged to tailored suits and polished shoes, there was now something else, something out of place. Tiny fingers pressing against the cold surface, soft movements echoing louder than gunfire ever could in a room built for control, and Ethan didn't notice it at first, because he was reading numbers, numbers that moved millions, numbers that shaped lives he would never see, until there was a sound, not loud, not sharp, but soft, almost curious, like a question the world wasn't supposed to ask him. And when he looked up, it wasn't a man, not an assistant, not a threat, but a child, barely able to stand, steadying itself against the edge of his desk, wide eyes reflecting a world it didn't understand, but somehow wasn't afraid of. And for a second, nothing made sense, because children didn't belong here, not in this building, not in this life, not in a room where every breath was measured. And yet there it was, looking at him as if none of that mattered, as if he wasn't the man people feared, as if he was something else entirely. And then the child smiled, a small, unguarded smile that didn't ask permission, didn't calculate consequences, didn't recognize power, and it took a step closer, hands reaching up, not for protection, not for fear, but for familiarity. And that was when it happened, when the single word broke through everything he had built, soft, clear, and completely certain. Papa. And the world didn't shatter, it didn't explode, it simply stopped. Because Ethan Cole, the man who never hesitated, the man who decided fates with a single sentence, froze, not from anger, not from confusion, but from something deeper, something older than power, something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever, as if that word had reached into a part of him he had buried so far beneath control and silence that even he forgot it existed. And the city outside kept moving, cars passing, people living, unaware that in a room above them, the most powerful man in that building had just lost his breath to a voice that didn't belong there. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to do next. The air did not move, yet everything inside that room felt different, as if the balance had shifted in a way no one else could see. And the child's hand remained lifted, small fingers opening and closing patiently, waiting for a response that had never been denied before in its short life. While Ethan stood there, the distance between them no more than a few feet, but suddenly impossible to measure in anything familiar. Because this was not a negotiation, not a decision that could be calculated or controlled. And behind the child, the woman finally stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile rather than dangerous, her voice softer now, but carrying a weight that did not belong to a simple apology. "Please," she said, not loudly, not pleading in the way people usually did around him, but steady, almost protective. And that word alone made Ethan's attention sharpen, because it was not directed at him. It was directed at the moment itself, as if she was trying to hold it together just long enough to survive it. And he noticed then the way she moved, not like someone afraid of punishment, but like someone trying to prevent recognition, her eyes flickering to the child, then back to him, measuring, calculating something he could not yet see. And when she reached the child, she did not pull him away immediately, did not rush to erase the scene. Instead, she crouched down, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, grounding him, steadying him, and even that small gesture felt deliberate, as if she knew something about this moment that he did not. "We need to go," she whispered, her tone gentle but firm. and the child turned his head just slightly, looking at her, then back at Ethan, and for a second, that connection held, unbroken, unafraid, and Ethan felt it again, that quiet pull beneath everything, something that did not belong in his world but refused to leave. And then he saw it, not in the child, but in her, a detail so small it could have been missed, the way her hand tightened just enough, the way her breath paused when the child looked at him again, as if she was waiting for something to happen, something she could not control once it began. And that was when the question grew louder, no longer distant, no longer easy to ignore, because this was not just a mistake, not just a child wandering where he should not be. This was a moment layered with something deeper, something hidden beneath years of silence. And Ethan took a step forward, not fast, not threatening, just enough to close the space slightly, and the woman's entire body reacted in an instant, not stepping back, not showing fear, but bracing, as if preparing for a truth she had hoped to delay. And that alone told him more than any words could have, because people feared consequences around him. They feared orders, they feared what he might do. But this was different. She feared what he might remember. And the realization settled in slowly, heavy and undeniable, because memory was the one thing he did not allow himself to revisit, not the past, not the faces, not the moments that could weaken control. And yet here it was again, standing in front of him, wrapped in silence and small hands and a single word that refused to fade. And when he finally spoke, his voice was lower than usual, not sharp, not commanding, but deliberate, careful in a way no one had ever heard from him before. What is his name? And the question did not sound like an order. It sounded like something else entirely, something closer to a search. And the woman hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough to confirm what he already felt forming beneath the surface. And when she answered, her voice steady despite everything pressing against it, Noah. The name settled into the room with the same quiet certainty as the word before it, and Ethan did not look away this time, because something inside him had already begun to shift, something that would not return to silence again. The name did not belong in that room, yet it lingered there, steady and undeniable, as if it carried weight far beyond its simplicity, and Ethan repeated it silently, testing it against something buried deep within him, something that did not surface easily, because names meant connections, and connections meant history, and history was something he had spent years controlling, minimizing, locking away behind decisions that allowed no room for uncertainty. Yet now uncertainty stood right in front of him, small, quiet, and impossible to dismiss. And Noah did not seem to notice any of it. His attention fixed on Ethan with a kind of calm curiosity that made no sense in a place like this, because children were supposed to react, to sense tension, to pull away from unfamiliar presence. But this child did not, instead taking another small step forward, closing the distance even more, until there was barely space left between them, and the woman moved again, this time faster, her hand tightening gently around Noah's arm, not pulling him harshly, but guiding him back just enough to create space, to reestablish something that felt safer, more controlled. "That is enough," she said quietly, her voice steady but edged with something protective, and Ethan's gaze shifted back to her, sharper now, more focused, because that tone did not match the situation. It was not fear speaking, it was boundary. And boundaries were not something people placed in front of him, not here, not in his space. And yet she did, without raising her voice, without stepping away, holding her ground in a way that did not challenge him directly but did not surrender either. And that alone unsettled him more than defiance ever could, because it suggested something deeper than courage, something rooted in necessity, as if she had decided long ago what she would protect, regardless of the cost. And for a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching again, but this time it felt different, heavier, as if it was waiting for something to surface. And Ethan's eyes moved, not randomly, but carefully, taking in details he had overlooked before, the faint crease in her uniform sleeve, the way her posture held tension without collapse, the quiet strength beneath the exhaustion, and then something else, something smaller, almost invisible, a thin silver chain resting at her collarbone, half hidden beneath fabric, catching just enough light to draw attention without intention. And it was not the object itself that mattered, but the way it triggered something. A flicker of memory so brief it almost disappeared before it formed. A moment from years ago, a place he had chosen to forget, and he felt it then, not fully, not clearly, but enough to disrupt the stillness he depended on, and the realization came not as a sudden answer, but as a growing awareness that this moment was not isolated, that it was connected to something he had left unfinished, something he had not allowed himself to question until now. And Noah shifted again, his small hand brushing lightly against Ethan's sleeve. A simple, unintentional touch that should have meant nothing, yet it did, because Ethan did not step back, did not remove himself, did not restore the distance he always maintained, instead standing there, allowing the contact to exist for just a second longer than it should have. And the woman saw it, her expression tightening almost imperceptibly, as if that single second confirmed something she had feared from the beginning. And when she spoke again, her voice was softer, but the meaning behind it was firm. "We will not disturb you again." And it was not an apology, not entirely. It was a decision, a line drawn quietly but clearly. And as she reached to lift Noah into her arms, preparing to leave, Ethan spoke again, not loudly, not forcefully, but with a precision that stopped everything mid-motion. "Wait." And that single word carried no threat, no anger, only intent. And for the first time, it was not control that held the room still. It was something else entirely, something neither of them could fully name yet, but both of them felt all the same. The word did not rise above a calm tone, yet it held the kind of authority that had stopped conversations, decisions, and entire rooms before. And still, this time, it carried something different beneath it, something quieter, something that did not demand obedience but invited pause. And the woman felt it immediately, her movement halting mid-step as Noah rested against her shoulder, his small hand still loosely gripping the fabric of her uniform, unaware of the shift that had just taken place. And for a moment she did not turn around, as if delaying that action might buy her time, might allow her to gather whatever strength she would need for what came next, because she knew this was no longer about a simple mistake, no longer about a child wandering into the wrong room. This was something else entirely, something she had worked carefully to avoid, to control, to keep at a distance. And now that distance had been erased in a matter of seconds, and when she finally turned, her expression was composed, but her eyes held a tension that could not be hidden completely, a quiet readiness, not for confrontation, but for truth. And Ethan took a step closer, not enough to threaten, not enough to invade, but enough to narrow the space into something more personal, something that could not be ignored. And his gaze did not leave her this time, studying not just her presence, but her reaction, the way she held Noah, the way she chose her stillness, the way she did not look away. And it was in those details that something continued to form, slowly, persistently, refusing to be dismissed. "How long have you been working here?" he asked, his voice measured, each word deliberate. And it was a simple question on the surface, but beneath it was something else, something searching, something building toward a conclusion he was not ready to state yet. And she understood that immediately, not because of the question itself, but because of the way he asked it, the absence of distance, the absence of dismissal. And she hesitated, just briefly, just enough to reveal that the answer mattered more than it should have. 3 months, she replied, her voice steady, controlled, and Ethan absorbed that without reaction. But his mind did not stop there, because 3 months did not explain. The recognition he felt did not explain the way the child had spoken, did not explain the way she had looked at him, and his eyes shifted again, not randomly, but intentionally, searching for something that would anchor the feeling into something real, something undeniable. And that was when he saw it again, more clearly this time. The silver chain at her neck, the faint glint of a small pendant hidden just beneath the collar of her uniform. And the memory flickered stronger now, not complete, not fully formed, but closer, like a reflection just beneath the surface of water. And he felt it then, the quiet certainty that this was not coincidence, that this was not chance, that something had connected long before this moment, something he had chosen not to revisit. And Noah shifted again in her arms, turning his head slightly, his gaze drifting back toward Ethan with the same calm curiosity as before. And this time, There was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty, just the same word, soft and certain as before, "Papa." And the room did not react. No one spoke, no one moved. But something inside Ethan did, something that had remained untouched for years, something that now refused to stay buried any longer. And for the first time, the question was no longer distant, no longer avoidable. It was right there, clear and present, demanding to be faced, and Ethan did not look away, did not retreat, did not restore the distance he once relied on, instead standing there, fully aware that whatever came next would change something fundamental, something he could not control, and yet for once, he did not try to stop it. The second time the word was spoken, it did not surprise him. It confirmed something that had already begun to take shape beneath the surface, and Ethan did not react immediately, not because he did not hear it, but because he was listening differently now, not to the sound itself, but to what it carried, to the quiet certainty behind it, to the way it settled into the space between them as if it had always belonged there. And Noah did not hesitate after saying it, did not question it, his small hand lifting again toward Ethan with that same simple expectation, as if the response was already understood, as if the connection did not need to be explained, and the woman saw it, every detail of it, the repeated word, the unbroken gaze, the growing stillness in Ethan's posture, and something inside her shifted, not panic, not anymore, but acceptance of a moment she had tried to delay for as long as possible, and her grip around Noah tightened just slightly, not to restrain him, but to steady herself, and when she spoke this time, her voice carried a different weight, less apology, more resolve. "He is just a child," she said, not as an excuse, but as a boundary, a quiet attempt to contain what could no longer be undone, and Ethan's eyes moved to her again, sharper now, more focused, because that statement did not address the question forming in his mind. It avoided it, redirected it, and he recognized that immediately, because he had spent years reading people, understanding what they said and what they chose not to say. And this was not confusion. This was control, her control, and that alone confirmed what he had already begun to suspect, that she knew more than she was willing to reveal, and that knowledge had been carried carefully, deliberately, until now, and Ethan took another step forward, closing the distance just enough that the moment could no longer remain abstract, no longer remain distant, and his voice, when it came again, was quieter than before, but far more precise. "Look at me." And it was not a command spoken with force, it was a request shaped like one, and she hesitated, just for a second, her eyes lowering instinctively before lifting again to meet his, and in that moment, whatever distance had existed between them disappeared completely, because recognition no longer had space to hide, and Ethan saw it clearly now, not in fragments, not in impressions, but in certainty, the way her expression held familiarity beneath restraint, the way her presence aligned with something he had not allowed himself to revisit, and the memory came back then, not all at once, not fully, but enough to break through the wall he had built, a night defined not by control, but by something rare, something human, something he had walked away from without looking back, and now it stood in front of him again, not as a memory, but as consequence, quiet, steady, undeniable, and the realization did not arrive with noise, it arrived in silence, in the space between breaths, in the way his posture shifted without intention, in the way his hand, almost unconsciously, moved slightly forward before stopping, as if reaching for something he had not yet decided to accept, and Noah watched all of it without understanding, his small voice breaking the silence once more, softer this time, almost curious, "Papa." And this time, Ethan did not freeze, did not retreat, did not ignore it. Instead, he lowered himself slightly, just enough to bring his presence closer to the child's level, and that single movement changed everything, because it was not power that guided it. It was something else entirely, something unfamiliar, something that did not belong to the man he had been, and for the first time, he did not question the word. He questioned himself, and that was far more dangerous than anything he had ever faced before. The shift in his posture did not go unnoticed, not by her, not by the quiet tension that had filled the room since the first word was spoken, and when Ethan lowered himself just enough to meet Noah at eye level, It was not a gesture anyone in that building had ever seen before, because he did not bend, not for anyone, not for anything. And yet now he did, not out of weakness, not out of uncertainty, but because something in that moment demanded it in a way nothing else ever had. And Noah responded immediately, his small face lighting with a simple, unfiltered recognition that carried no doubt, no hesitation, as if this was exactly where he was supposed to be. And he reached forward again, this time without pause, his tiny fingers brushing against Ethan's hand. And for a second, neither of them moved, because that contact, light as it was, held a weight that could not be measured, and Ethan felt it, not physically, but somewhere deeper, somewhere that had remained untouched by everything he had built. And behind Noah, the woman stood still, her breath held in a way she could not control anymore, because this was the moment she had tried to avoid, the moment where distance would no longer protect her, where silence would no longer hold. And she saw it clearly now, the way Ethan did not pull back, the way his gaze did not harden, the way his hand remained where it was, allowing the contact to exist, allowing the connection to take shape without interruption. And something inside her shifted again, not fear, but inevitability, because there was no returning from this, no undoing what had already begun. And Ethan's eyes lifted slowly from Noah to her, not with accusation, not with anger, but with something far more difficult to face, something searching, something that demanded truth without force. And when he spoke, his voice was steady, but beneath it was something new, something that had not existed before this moment. You knew, and it was not a question. It was a realization spoken aloud, and she did not answer immediately, not because she did not understand, but because she had always known this moment would come, and she had spent months preparing for it without ever believing it would happen like this, without warning, without control. And Noah shifted slightly between them, his attention moving from one to the other, unaware of the weight his presence carried, unaware of the truth that now stood at the edge of being spoken. And she finally exhaled, slow and controlled, her gaze steady as she met Ethan's, not hiding anymore, not avoiding, because there was no point in doing so now. I knew you would not remember, she said quietly, and the words did not carry blame, did not accuse, they simply existed, clear and undeniable. And Ethan absorbed them without reaction, but inside, something settled into place, something that aligned with the fragments he had been piecing together, something that made the moment complete in a way he could not ignore. And his hand moved slightly, not pulling away, but turning just enough so that Noah's fingers rested more fully against it. And that small adjustment, that quiet acceptance, spoke louder than anything else could have, because it was not forced, not calculated, it was instinctive. And the woman saw it, every detail of it, and her expression softened just slightly, not with relief, but with something closer to recognition, because she understood what that meant. She understood what it cost him to allow that. And for a moment, the room held that silence again, not tense, not uncertain, but heavy with something real, something that could not be undone. And for the first time, Ethan did not feel the need to control it, did not feel the need to define it, because some truths did not require permission to exist. They simply did, and now, so did this one. The words did not echo with accusation, yet they settled with a weight that neither of them could deny. And Ethan remained where he was, still lowered slightly, his hand steady beneath Noah's small fingers, as if moving now would break something that had just begun to form. And for a moment, the world outside that office no longer mattered, not the city, not the power, not the structure he had built so carefully over the years, because all of it felt distant compared to the quiet truth standing in front of him. And he studied her again, not as a stranger, not as an employee, but as someone who had existed in a part of his life he had chosen not to revisit. And now that distance had collapsed entirely, leaving no space for denial. And she did not look away this time, did not lower her gaze or retreat behind silence, because she understood something he was only beginning to realize, that this moment was no longer about control, it was about acknowledgement. And Noah shifted slightly between them, his attention moving from one to the other with innocent curiosity, unaware that his presence had already changed everything. And Ethan's voice came again, quieter than before, but clearer, more certain. Why did you come here? And it was not suspicion that shaped the question, it was something closer to understanding, as if he was trying to place the final piece in something that had already taken form, and she exhaled slowly, her hand resting more securely against Noah's back, grounding herself before answering. Because this was the part she had prepared for, the part she had rehearsed in. Silence, over and over again, without ever believing she would actually have to say it. "I did not come for you," she said, and the truth in her voice did not waver, did not soften. It stood exactly as it was, simple and direct, and Ethan did not interrupt, did not challenge it, because he could see it, the way she held herself, the absence of manipulation, the absence of expectation. And that alone told him more than anything else could have. And she continued, her voice steady despite everything pressing against it. "I came because I needed a job, and this was the only place that would not ask questions." And the words settled into the room with quiet clarity, stripping away any assumption of intention, any narrative that would have made this easier to define, and Ethan absorbed that in silence, because it aligned with everything he had seen, everything he had felt in the way she carried herself, in the way she had not approached him, had not revealed anything, had not sought anything from him. And that realization shifted something again, deeper this time, because it meant this was not a plan, not a strategy, not something designed to reach him. It was simply circumstance, and circumstance had brought something into his life that he had not chosen, had not prepared for, and yet now stood in front of him with undeniable presence. And Noah leaned slightly forward again, his small hand tightening just a bit around Ethan's fingers, as if anchoring the moment in a way only a child could, and Ethan did not pull away, did not correct it, instead allowing the contact to remain, because for the first time, control did not feel necessary, not here, not now, and the woman watched him carefully, not expecting anything, not asking for anything, but recognizing the shift all the same, because she could see it in the way he no longer created distance, in the way he no longer dismissed what stood in front of him. And for a moment, the room fell into silence again. But this time it was not heavy with tension, it was filled with something else, something quieter, something closer to truth. And Ethan finally spoke again, his voice low, deliberate, and entirely different from the man he had been just minutes ago. "You stayed." And it was not a question, not an accusation, it was an observation, one that carried weight without judgment, and she nodded slightly, her gaze steady, because there was no reason to deny it. And in that small exchange, something settled fully into place, something neither of them could undo, something that would not disappear once they walked out of that room. And for the first time, Ethan understood that this was not a moment that could be controlled or dismissed. It was something that would follow him long after the silence returned. The acknowledgement did not need to be spoken again, because it had already settled into the space between them, quiet and irreversible, and Ethan remained where he was, his hand still beneath Noah's, not as a gesture, not as a decision made with intention, but as something that had simply become natural in a way he could not explain. And the silence that followed was no longer uncertain, it was full, carrying the weight of everything that had been revealed without ever needing to be fully said. And the city outside continued to move as it always did, unaware that something fundamental had shifted in a room high above it, something that could not be undone once recognized. And Noah, unaware of any of it, leaned slightly forward again, his small fingers curling more securely around Ethan's, as if confirming a connection that required no explanation. And Ethan did not pull away, did not correct the moment, because for the first time, control did not feel necessary, not here, not now. And that realization settled deeper than anything else had, because control had always defined him, had always been the foundation of every decision, every boundary, every distance he maintained. And yet now, in the presence of something so simple, so unguarded, it no longer held the same weight. And he looked at the woman again, not searching this time, not questioning, but seeing her clearly, fully, without the separation he had placed between himself and the world for so long. And she held his gaze without hesitation, without expectation, because she understood something he was only beginning to accept, that this was not about what either of them wanted. It was about what already existed and could no longer be ignored. And Ethan slowly straightened, not stepping back, not creating distance, but rising into himself with a quiet awareness that something within him had changed, something that would not return to what it was before. And when he spoke again, his voice carried none of the sharp authority that had once defined it. Instead, it was measured, grounded in something deeper, something more human. He stays with you. And the words were not a command, not entirely. They were a decision shaped by something he had never allowed to guide him before. And she nodded once, not surprised, not relieved, simply acknowledging what she had always intended. And Noah shifted again, his attention moving between them, content in a way that required no explanation. And Ethan's gaze lingered there for a moment longer, taking in the small details, the quiet presence, the undeniable truth that stood in front of him. And then he spoke once more, softer this time, almost as if testing something he had never allowed himself to say before. But he does not leave. And the room fell still again, not from tension, but from the meaning behind those words, because they were not about control, not about possession. They were about something else entirely, something closer to acceptance, and she understood that, not as a demand, but as a shift, a line that had been redrawn without force. And for the first time, she did not resist it, did not question it, because she could see it clearly now, the way he no longer stood apart from what was in front of him, the way he no longer denied what had been revealed. And in that moment, nothing else needed to be said, because the truth had already taken its place, steady and undeniable. And as Noah's small voice rose once more, softer now, almost like a whisper meant only for him, "Papa." Ethan did not freeze, did not hesitate, did not question it. Instead, he let the word exist, fully, completely, without resistance. And that was the moment everything changed, not with noise, not with force, but with acceptance, quiet and absolute. And in that silence, something long buried finally found its place again, not as a memory, but as a truth he could no longer turn away from. And for the first time, he did not want to.